Brill. So thank you so much, Dan, for obviously jumping on the security space. Obviously, what me and Dan will be discussing today is the importance of cybersecurity in the NHS. And obviously, Dan is just about to give us a quick introduction to his background. So yeah, mate, if you could take it away, tell me a little bit about yourself, your current role, and that will obviously tie in quite well to our topic as well.
Yeah, perfect. No, thanks, Nick. Name's Dan Jeffery. I am currently the Deputy Chief Information Officer and then the full kind of CISO, so Chief Information Security Officer for us at NHS Blood and Transplant. I've been here for over 2.5 years. And prior to that, I was at NHS Digital, where I led the basically the delivery of the cyber program from 2018. So the first bow wave of cash and funding through the summer of 20 and the kind of the key original response, if you will, to the COVID the COVID crisis. So supporting the system and test and trace to make sure we're cyber secure. And prior to that, I was in the private sector as a cybersecurity kind of strategy consultant. For a number of kind of consulting organizations and technology organizations.
Perfect. So I think we're in safe hands today for the pod, given your background, Dan. So I'm surprised with everything that you just said, you don't have more grey hairs, because that sounds like a lot of stress. Definitely, obviously, the test and trace period as well. But yes, obviously, what I wanted to start off with. So again, just to reiterate the title of the pod, we're talking about the importance of security in the NHS. So what is the current nature of the threat to the NHS, in the cyberspace? What do you guys have to sort of be aware of on a daily basis?
So the threat, as it were, from cyberspace to the NHS is, it's a standard answer, right? It's diverse. It is diverse, and it's not because we're trying to be cute about anything. It's because the nature of the threat landscape ranges everything from kind of the what we call the script kiddie, the 13-year-old, the teenager, who's trying to just cause a bit of nuisance in their parents' kind of basement, all the way through to kind of organized criminal gangs who are well financed, well resourced, really looking to kind of access and exploit the massive amounts of valuable data that we have as a system, as each individual organizations within the system, but also as a system as a whole. And then there are those more kind of state orientated actors as well, but we see less of those just now, but more on that kind of organized criminal kind of space, and that's both in terms of targeted campaigns and then also what we call opportunistic kind of activities as well. So it's a real kind of smorgasbord, if you will, of the threat actor profile, but that's obviously the outside in. There's also the inside out. There are the insider risk, the insider threat, and that is both in terms of the accidental the accidental insider, if you will, the person who kind of clicks on the phishing link, the classic kind of phishing kind of attack profile, but also the reply all, all those kind of good things. But then there's also the malicious insider. It's pretty rare to kind of see this in health and care because everybody's motivated by kind of doing good for individuals, for society, for patients, etc. But it does happen, right? With a workforce of in the NHS alone of over 1.5 million people, there are going to be those that seek to do us harm, either aggrieved employees or what have you. So it's both inside out and outside in. So a very diverse kind of threat landscape from a threat actor perspective, and they look to seek to exploit human frailties in terms of social engineering orientated attacks, phishing, the mass campaigns of phishing and spear phishing, where it's a lot more targeted on individuals in order to be able to kind of gain access. And what they look to do by gaining access is to deploy a whole variety of different kind of techniques or malware, whatever it may be, to basically gain access to data, to have an effect on the estate, be it disruptive or espionage or whatever, or kind of criminal in nature. So that's one kind of approach, the social factor, the human factor element. Then there's also the technical vulnerabilities angle as well, which is, if we look at it on the basic hygiene side of things, looking at unpatched systems, where there are unpatched systems which we can exploit, where are databases exposed to the internet which we can exploit, all those kind of hygiene factors, getting the people not having the time, inclination or awareness to get the basics right. And then on the next kind of phase along from that is those that really craft an attack path based around real kind of dedication to the cause. If you're kind of the bad guy, really understanding the environment in which you're trying to kind of infiltrate and exploit, and then basically working your way through technical means or through the social engineering means to gain traction, and then gain traction and then exploit your access for whatever nefarious means that you're after, right? And that can include, at the very sharp end, what the media like to kind of phrase as the 0-day exploit, the thing that nobody's ever seen before, therefore there's no firewall rule, therefore there's no patch, etc. All the way through to, as I say, kind of common vulnerabilities which haven't been patched, which haven't been addressed, which haven't been remediated. So
pretty much you've got to be sharp on all fronts. It sounds like you're getting hit from every single every single door, every single opportunity, in all different styles as well. So like how do you firstly break it down internally to get the processes right? Because we know, in essence, I'm just going to bring up a previous podcast as well that I did with Chris Corp, who's from the Police Digital Service. Straight away you're up against it because of the, where I'm going with this, with the budgetary requirements of working in the public sector. So you're under a hell of a lot of stress because you've got to organise your teams, you've got to organise the security landscape for the the NHS, but you've got you've basically got the hardest job in security, is what I'm trying to say, Dan, because you've got to do all of this with a tight budget. How do you do it?
So it's it is quite tricky, I'll be honest, but it's not a case of you're always the water isn't always lapping over your head, right? Okay. There's actually the way in which the NHS has kind of stood itself up over the last kind of 5 years or so has been through a principle of Defenders One, which is now enshrined and codified within the new cyber strategy for the NHS, and importantly social care as well. So there is a pillar there, Defenders One, and one of the key tenants under that is a suite of national capabilities made available to those in kind of across the NHS. That's how it has been for the last few years. It's likely to change for the positive going forward. But what this means are kind of common capabilities, commonly required technologies, and also importantly processes, access to training materials, all those kind of good things are available centrally, better, bigger buying power and all that kind of good stuff, which you can leverage, which means that the local organization, someone like myself, doesn't therefore have to kind of spend the precious pennies on, and we can actually focus on deploying our financial resources to meet our specific nuances, as it were. So how do we do that? Because that's still a finite pot of cash for an infinite amount of challenge, effectively. So how do we do it? We really understand your estate, understand what are the kind of the crown jewels, the critical services, the mission critical services that you must protect at kind of all costs. What are those? And then you work out from there, mission critical, business important, then kind of other, your Minesweeper or your Microsoft Paint, they kind of fall into that last bit, slightly tongue in cheek. But once you understand that kind of criticality profile, then you're then able to kind of target interventions based on criticality and then based on risk. Understand not just the estate, but the risk posed to it and by it. From that, you then dovetail the two to get a prioritized list, activity areas, project programs, etc. And the way in which we've kind of structured that, because even that in itself can be quite complicated, is actually looking at tried and tested, proven frameworks and methodologies to really kind of get clarity in that kind of fairly opaque kind of problem space. So we use NIST at the moment as kind of the broad brushstroke framework within NHSBT, and there's kind of 5 core areas: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. So how do you identify risk, threat, vulnerability? How do you therefore then protect against it? And they could be controls or technology, whatever it may be. And then how do you detect it, right? Because you won't be able to protect against everything. So how do you detect stuff that come in? So that's more about monitoring and kind of risk management, all those kind of things. Then we all have to accept. It's a case of when a cyber event happens, not if it happens. So therefore, you need to have really good capability, well tested, well drilled capability around response and recovery. So can you respond quickly, accurately, precisely at pace and scale? And then are you able to kind of recover from any kind of detriment in a predictable, known manner, so as to reduce the impact on kind of, in our case, clinical or patient or donor facing activities and services. So and then be able to assign your services across there and making sure you've got the right coverage, proportionate and appropriate coverage, is half the trick in that regard. So that's how you start to kind of conceive, especially like the batting order, if you will, of what you need to do, what capabilities do you need to put in place, and what processes do you need to put in place, both in terms of kind of after the fact controls. We've got systems that have been around for a while. Security wasn't necessarily a thing, not like a front of mind activity in the same way that it is now, same way that kind of along the same lines of privacy wasn't really a front of mind activity in the same way that it is now. So how do we kind of retrospectively apply controls? Sometimes you have to do compensatory controls, etc., rather than the pure play. But for everything that you're building from today and this point forward, how do you ensure that security and privacy are built in by design from the very first, almost the very first conversation that is had about capability X or service Y? How do you ensure that you have appropriate and proportionate levels of security and privacy built in, so you don't end up with a retrospective problem, and actually security doesn't become a blocker but rather an enabler of that service in terms of its usability, in terms of its predictability, and also in terms of its uptake. We are, especially if you've got a public facing service or capability that you want to bring online or a product, if you are able to demonstrate that it is secure and private by design, people, especially when you come to people's health and care kind of services and products, right? They want to know that, a bit like with a banking app. They want to know that their data is private and secure. And when they are comfortable with that, the uptake becomes greater because it's much more convenient, because actually people are happy and comfortable with using it. Therefore, your ROI, your return on investment on that product, and the benefits that you intended from that product or service become more realized, maybe quicker, but certainly become realized by virtue of doing these two activities, private and secure by design, which were previously, before WannaCry, before GDPR, largely seen as a bit of a pain, and largely seen as a bit of a cost center, a burning pit of cash, rather than actually something that fundamentally helps drive that top line of uptake and capability.
Yeah, and I got a question on what you said there about the, security by design approach. And has the NHS, always been quite, thumbs up when it comes to security? Because obviously a lot of people that I speak to, well, it can pretty much be 50-50 in a sense of like, sometimes when they leave organisations, it's because their organisation just isn't backing them. So what's your experience been on that front?
So I think over the last 5 years we have had a watershed moment, right? I think the conversations around security in health and care have been going on for ages, right? And in fact, actually, each clinician each person that works in the NHS has always been aware of security, right, in some way, shape, or form, and it manifests itself through their jobs. Challenging folks from entering on wards, for example, and making sure that records are kept confidential. Confidentiality is 1/3 of the security triad, right? So confidentiality, availability, integrity. I think what's happened over the last kind of 5 years since WannaCry, or 6 years, blimey, 6 years since kind of WannaCry, has been that there's been that fundamental shift of actually those considerations, concerns, and kind of obligations we had around security in the physical world actually can manifest themselves in the digital world, and we've seen experience of what happens when we don't get this right. And that is, WannaCry is the big wake up call for everyone, the burning platform, what have you. But even prior to that, in the winter of 2016, North Links and Ghoul got hit by a ransomware attack. They were taken down. Their operational impact was massive. Since WannaCry, yes, we haven't had like another national scale event, but over the summer in 2022, last year, we had an attack on the supply chain, and that really showed interconnectedness and interdependency. But I think the mindset is starting to shift, within the wider NHS, right? So people have woken up to the fact that in order for the kind of potential of the digital revolution, or whatever you want to call it, that we're going through just now, especially in health and care, we have to kind of modernize our view of the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath says keep patient data confidential and do no harm. In a digital world, in a cyber world, confidentiality is confidentiality. Let's make sure patient data is kept confidential and only accessed by those people that need or should be able to kind of see it, etc. So that's fine. We're pretty good at that. We've been doing that for a couple of thousand years, right? The do no harm bit, this is the bit that fundamentally changes in the digital world, because ultimately do no harm are the other two parts of the security triad, availability and integrity. If a clinician or a healthcare worker or whoever they may be is not able to access the data they need in order to be able to make a diagnostic decision or some kind of healthcare pathway orientated decision, patient harm is likely. And if they cannot trust the data in which they're seeing, if the integrity of that data is called into question, there is danger for patient harm. So that's why actually we now need to it has been updated or needs to be updated and look through that clinical lens. That will then help really drive kind of understanding, the awareness, and obviously the importance of cyber across all care settings, be it secondary care in trusts and arm's length bodies like NHS, but also primary care, so GPs and all that side of life, and then also into social care as well, because get that right, we can have greater confidence around the use of digital technologies, which then drives efficiencies, which then drives greater patient outcomes, and it's all a virtuous circle, but starts off with that piece there around understanding what it means.
And I want to touch on actually the interconnectedness that you mentioned there, but just purely on the NHS front. So obviously I know that you've worked for NHS Digital, and now you're at NHS BT. So is it all intertwined, or is there separate entities, or is that why digital has now recently been brought into the full NHS fold in that merger? What if, let's just say, NHS BT got hit, does that then give them a doorway into the other areas of the NHS? How does it work?
So I mean, it's a seemingly simple question with a horribly complicated answer, but we'll give it a go, right? So each individual trust, organization, arm's length body is its own entity, right? It is its own, if you will, sovereign entity. It's got its own profit and loss, financial accountability, responsibility, its own staff, etc. It also, if we're looking at trusts, they also have their own technology estate. Now, for a number of common services, national services, there is a national provider. What was NHS Digital, which provides a number of national services, things like email, NHS Mail, things like electronic prescriptions, etc., secondary use service data feeds, all of those things. They are available to everybody in kind of secondary care. And there is a national network for health and social care called HSCN. Again, people are strongly encouraged, and I think an overwhelming majority of folks do actually use it, but they're not obliged to. It's just the way in which we're structured. We're trying to make sure that we have that localization agenda to drive services, offerings, and how in which they're offered meet the needs of local folks. And completely get that, but there's also that national piece as well. So you end up with a bit of overlap, bit of use of central, but a lot of local as well. So to your kind of next question, which was around, so if something got in, could it just spread like wildfire? Well, we kind of saw that with WannaCry, right? It got into an entry point, and then through basically exploiting 2 0-day exploits, it was able to promulgate worm across big chunks of the estate, especially that make only those which had not patched for the vulnerability, which had come out a number of months previously through a NHS Digital Care cert, right? So there is the how seriously do we take this, and the answer is when those things come out, take them very seriously, because you could have saved yourself a fair bit of mischief had they done that back in the day. So there is the opportunity for it to promulgate across organizations, but again, it's very specific to the attack, the malware in question. Just by virtue of getting into one trust doesn't mean you're going to be able to then springboard and propagate across into another. In actual fact, most of the time it is within a network, right? So the folks that say try to get into NHSBT, try and get in, and then they will look to kind of traverse across our network. We haven't seen much activity of them manually then turning around and trying to go into the next one. Once they're successful, they tend to exploit what they can, rather than have that wildfire effect, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation. And what would actually happen to the everyday man? What are some of the risks? Let's say like to blood donors or anything like that. If they were to get their details sort of breached, what would be some of the ramifications on a human level should you guys get hit?
Yeah. So I mean, regards to this NHSBT, well, we'll come to NHSBT specifically in a second, but when it comes to healthcare data, regardless if it's NHSBT or a major London or Manchester trust or a tiny little provincial trust or GP, the fact of the matter is healthcare data is non-perishable. It's really valuable because it follows you around for life. If you nicked my credit card details and try to flog them on the dark web, you get like 75p worth of for it, right? Because I can cancel my credit card. Take my healthcare record and flog that on dark web, you're going to get in the region of about 50 quid, because you've got my details, obviously, and then my next of kin, enough information about address, phone number, NHS number, fine, but those kind of key personal details, where you could apply for credit cards, you could all those kind of fraudulent bits. It's not necessarily the health elements of my record. It's actually those bits which you can then use to get financial gain, right? That isn't to say that folks would target, could potentially use, say, if there was something on my medical record which they then went to blackmail me with. That's also another vector that opens up. But that's why they're so valuable as compared to a credit card record, is because you can do a lot more with it. So we've got that, right? So all kind of records, all kind of healthcare data is very, very valuable. And then if you look at from an NHSBT perspective, ultimately we are an organization that is basically dependent upon the altruism of others, right? There's only two ways about it. We're not like other kind of like other blood systems, right? Like the States and Canada, etc., where you pay for blood donations. We ask people to come in, that they get a chocolate biscuit at the end of it, but that's the only reward they get, right? So we are 100% reliant on the kind nature of them to come in and give us like one of the most valuable products we have to offer for free. And then with our organ donation side, we are asking people to basically register a preference around what organs they would like to kind of donate, should they be eligible once they die, right? These are all altruistic things.
Yeah.
If confidence in our ability to store, process, use, and secure that data of those altruistic people gets called into question, then that ultimately has an impact on their want and desire to come in and sit in the donor chair, to go and register a preference on the organ donor register, which then has an impact on our blood stock levels or plasma stock levels or platelet levels for cancer treatment for the country, which then means that we may not be able to then kind of, give all the folks that need a donation the donation that they need. And as an organization, we are about building a world in which every patient receives the donation that they need, right? And unless you have security and privacy right up front and really well known and really well acknowledged, then we call that mission statement into question.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And I've only got one last question for you, Dan. To be honest with you, and we've talked a lot about sort of the threats and the worries and all the war stories a little bit, but I kind of wanted to finish a little bit on a lighter note. And so, tell me about maybe some of the successes or even some of the strategy for the coming years ahead with NHSBT.
Yeah. So I mean, the success from NHSBT. I mean, it's been a really incredible kind of over 2.5 years, right? The just the pace of change. The organization kind of really went, blimey, we can do something amazing with technology here. And the way in which we're going to do that is by being secure and private by design. So they kind of got it from the outset, okay? And they made, we have Wendy Clark as the interim CEO at the moment, CDIO when I joined, as kind of the spearhead there. So we had the right leadership in play to go, we're going to go this amazing digital journey. We're going to really revolutionize the way in which we deliver technology and make it enabling for the organization. But we're only doing this through a secure and private by design kind of approach, which was phenomenal, right? It's not particularly common for that kind of mindset to be the first bullet point number one on the checklist, right? So that was amazing, right? So, and then from around that, we could build out a really empowered team to go and deliver some awesome capability, right? And that's exactly what we've got. The cyber team, so the cyber ops team, are small but generally perfectly formed, right? Everyone is unbelievably dedicated, motivated, and self-learning, right? They are keen every day to kind of learn something new, and they've been unbelievable in helping but basically driving the establishment of the security operations center, striking up relationships with the NHS Digital, the national SOC as well. So that whole Defenders One piece, they're living it and breathing it, right? They're sharing of data, intel, logs, etc. Between the two organizations and really ingraining those relationships. But then also within our kind of information security or data security team as well, which is separate, they're going out across the business and really driving that cultural change, that cultural awareness. And they, again, small but perfectly formed, but they've changed the way in which the business, be it clinical services, blood, organs and tissues, think, understand and behave around kind of cybersecurity for the better, right? We're clearer and more precise at logging risks and all those kind of less glamorous side of things, but also we're more proactive at reporting, coming back into the cyber ops team to say, we think this looks a bit rum, can you help us out? Or we're about to do this thing, can you tell us the best or most appropriate security controls to put in place, etc., etc. So we're changing that cultural piece there, and it's been just amazing to see that flourish over kind of the last 2.5 years. And it's probably no great surprise to say that we've made dramatic improvements with kind of risk scores and the DSPT submissions and all those kind of good things, and the maturity score over those couple of years. But not only has it just been kind of a quick kind of improvement and then let it wither, etc. This is kind of embedded within the organization now, so it's kind of a part of the fabric almost.
Yep.
And it becomes self-sustaining, which is just and sustainable, which is just amazing to see. It's the pace of change, the rapid pace of change has been unbelievably refreshing to see, all because we have the right people, right leadership, and the right kind of mindset as a organization to take it seriously and make the changes required.
And it's refreshing to hear that, because obviously you hear a lot of the challenges when you first come in. It's part of the battle is, right, it's my job to make security enable. It's like that's just getting out the gates. Obviously you guys got out the gates and you're like, right, let's do this, and it's come from the top down, and it's all knitted together. And you don't need a large team when it's when it's all knit together and everybody knows the place. Like you say, it's small, but it's well run, and that's a lean business model if I've ever seen it. So
I mean, just to say, it hasn't always been easy, right? Like, it's not been there have been some big challenges along the way, right? Especially in the beginning, but we're able to overcome them, I suppose, is kind of the piece there. And there will be more challenges to come in the future. There will be prioritization challenges. We're entering more fiscally leaner times, and there are spend controls that are kind of going right over the whole system, right, which are really making it challenging to access skilled resource in a timely manner when you need them, and that actually does pose a genuine problem for us going forward. Like, how are we going to manage this? Because the demand for change and the priorities haven't changed. We still want to deliver kind of 1 through to 50 as a system, but access to specialist resources on a temporary kind of contractual or whatever basis has been tightened up pretty soundly, if I'm honest, and it's really tight. And then also headcount remains kind of slightly flat, and what it's like trying to get cyber resources in the NHS is challenging, right? It is challenging. So adding all those things together, it could be like we've got really beautiful foundations that we're working on, and we can keep singing along as we are just now in a sustainable fashion. But if we are going to be able to deliver against those priorities that everybody actually wants to deliver against, we're going to need to think again about spend control and actually how we do get access to skilled resources in a timely manner as and when we need them, because actually that's going to it's going to hamper the delivery in terms of the pace of delivery, or we'll revert back to a world in which security and privacy by design doesn't happen because it's not something that we're willing to pay for or willing to give access to the resources for, and that's not a good place for us to be.
No, that's the risk, isn't it? So, but like I say, we could probably unpick that on another pod, Dan. But thank you so much for coming on, mate. Obviously, if anybody's got any questions for Dan, like usual with the rest of the pods, I'll put all the details in the description below. But yeah, thanks so much again.
Perfect. Thank you.